This is the Louis T. Network.
In the lab room.
Exclusive.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Man, I tell you what, time flies when you're having fun. But I haven't been having a lot of fun this season. So it seems like this NFL season is going at its own leisurely pace. And I have no problem with that because, again, I am a football fan and I love the sport of football. And I want it to last for as long as it can humanly possibly last. So I don't have a problem with the season taking its precious time to come to its conclusion. As a matter of fact, I'd love it to take even longer. But again, we're in week number 15 now, and so we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. Teams are starting to carve out their niches in their individual conferences, and so we're getting down to where it's time to start talking about playoff pictures in each respective conference. I'll start with the AFC conference, as there was some Thursday night football action to get to, and so that kind of changed a lot of the standings in the AFC conference. So we'll break down the playoff race and the playoff picture in the AFC, and then we'll knock out the NFC in a separate video so that you're up to date on everything playoff related in the National Football League via the lab room. So I thank you for joining me here on the program. I don't know if I've properly introduced myself or not. I am your host, Lou. I thank you for joining me if I have not already. But it's funny because I've talked to some fans, and one in particular, and he was just saying about a week or two ago, man, it seems like last week was week one and this season just started. And I beg to differ. I feel like this season has went at a nice pace this year. And time flies when you're having fun. I remember last season when my team was 10-6, won 7 games in a row, won the division. It seemed like it was week 1, and then it was week 16, and then it was week 17. And then it was the playoffs, and then we were done. And I guess time flies when you're having fun. It was a blur last season because it was such a great ride. This year, it's been tumultuous. We've had controversies. It's been a mess. And so it just seems like this season has been dragging on to me. But again, you won't hear me complain because I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I just wanted to continue. So let's break down these conferences and talk about the playoff picture in each, starting with the AFC. And look, it's not about me. It's about the board. So I'm going to turn the show over to the big board. You'll hear the sound of my voice, but you'll be looking at the board the entire time. So looking at the American Football Conference playoff standings, aka the AFC Conference playoff race, this is how the playoff picture unfolds. You've got your 1 through number 6 seeds, which these are all the teams that are going to make it into the postseason. You only get 6 in each conference. These are your teams in the hunt. And honestly speaking, and theoretically, there should be more teams in the hunt category, but the way I see it, it's a 3-team race for the 6th and final wild card berth in the AFC. And it's between the Baltimore Ravens, the Miami Dolphins, and the San Diego Chargers. Everybody else, and I should technically and theoretically have the Tennessee Titans, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the New York Jets up here as well. Jets are 6-7 on the season, and 5-8 Tennessee, 5-8 Pittsburgh would round out the trio of teams that are supposed to be on this board theoretically. But again, none of those teams, in my estimation, have a realistic shot of making the postseason. Now, they're all still alive, but again, I'm only dealing with the teams that I think actually have a legitimate shot at making the postseason. I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste yours either. So not going to put those teams up here for the purpose of making sure that this is a very efficient show. So you start at the top. The number 1 seed currently in the AFC conference is the Denver Broncos, but a lot of things have changed via that loss on Thursday Night Football to the San Diego Chargers. Really don't know how that's going to impact them right away because, again, if New England wins, New England is now your number 1 seed, but New England has a tough one coming up on the road versus the Dolphins. They could easily lose that with no Gronkowski. That changes the whole landscape of the Patriots football team. I'm anxious to see how they do and how they play in Miami this Sunday. So that's one to keep an eye on because if the Patriots do in fact find a way to win that football game, they go to number 1. Denver comes down to number 2. And remember, the Broncos have lost to these Patriots, so they own the tiebreaker. So if these two teams end up tied, which they would if New England is able to win in week number 15 versus the Dolphins, these two would flip-flop, and the Patriots would go to number 1, and the Broncos would come down to the number 2 seed. The Denver Broncos are one of 2 teams in the AFC conference that has clinched a playoff berth. They have a burgundy star, which indicates that they have clinched a wild card berth. They haven't clinched their division yet. The only thing that star represents is that if they lost the rest of their games, they're the only team in this 6-team format over here in the playoff picture that could lose the rest of their games and still get into the postseason, with all the other teams on the outside looking in, winning the rest of their games. They're the only team that could do that. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, as you see, have a star as well. Theirs is a green star, indicating that they have won their division. They play in the worst division in all of football, the AFC South, so they have been able to clinch it with a mark of 8-5. So despite all these good records up here, they're the only team that has clinched because their division is so bad. So Denver right now sits atop this board, but we don't know for how long. This could easily be the New England Patriots by week's end at 11-3, but the Broncos currently are 11-3, 7-3 in the conference. And with that loss to San Diego on Thursday Night Football, they've dropped to 11-3. They've dropped to 7-3 in the conference. They were 7-2 coming into that game. They were 11-2. So now it's no longer in the Denver Broncos' hands. What they have done with that loss is they relinquished all power to the New England Patriots now. It's up to the Patriots to decide who's going to be the number 1 seed. If the Patriots want to be the number 1 seed, all they have to do is win. They win the rest of their games, the New England Patriots are your number 1 seed. All roads to the Super Bowl through the AFC have to go through Foxborough. If the Patriots decide to lose 1 or 2 games down the stretch and Denver decides to win the rest of their games, then the Denver Broncos would be your number 1 seed, and all roads to New York through the AFC will have to go through Denver. So it's going to be a very, very interesting finish to this season, as Denver has just made it a lot more interesting with that loss on Thursday Night Football. So I've essentially given you the number 1 and 2 seeds and the way those two look right now. But you look at number 3, and that's the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're a very interesting team as well, because what they've done is they've put themselves in a position that is very unique. With a 9-4 mark overall and a 7-3 conference mark, the Cincinnati Bengals are right there in a position to strike as well. Now, I don't see Denver losing 2 more games. I don't see Denver finishing up this season on a slide, but anything's possible. Okay, I didn't expect Denver to lose to San Diego on Thursday night, so it's really hard to predict, but I don't see Denver losing any more games. I think they'll finish up the season at 13-3. They could possibly finish the season up at 12-4. Anything's possible, but again, I think that Cincinnati still wouldn't be able to leapfrog this Denver Broncos team because of the way that it's set up with their conference records. And I tell you what, looking at it again, if Denver loses 1 more game within the conference, and Cincinnati, which they would have to win the rest of their games, Cincinnati could leapfrog both of these teams because they own the tiebreaker over New England. So if New England finishes tied with Cincinnati, Cincinnati is going to finish better than them, because Cincinnati beat New England a month ago in Cincinnati, so they own the tiebreaker over the New England Patriots. So it's vital that the Patriots continue to win games, because not only are they going after that number 1 seed, but they'll also need to fend off the Cincinnati Bengals from taking the 2 seed or possibly the 1 seed from them as well. So it's huge. To me, these first 3 teams are interchangeable. And no one else can penetrate these top 3 teams other than the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City can still win the AFC West, and they got a little bit of help from the San Diego Chargers. San Diego Superchargers gave them a little bit of help on Thursday with that win. So now if Kansas City wins in Week 15, they'll go to 11-3. And now with another Denver Broncos loss and another Kansas City Chiefs win, the Kansas City Chiefs would be your AFC West leaders in the clubhouse. So the Chiefs, just a week ago, seemed to be out of it. With 3 games left, down by 2, seemed very unlikely that the Chiefs would be able to still win this division. But now, with 2 games remaining for Denver and 3 games left for Kansas City, and they're only down 1, anything's possible if you are the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's the only way this top 3 can be affected by somebody on the outside looking in. Other than that, I think these 3 teams are interchangeable, but they'll be your 1 through 3 seeds. Honestly, is how I see it all working itself out. I see the Denver Broncos being your 1, 2, or 3 seed, but not falling anywhere below that. I see the New England Patriots being your 1, 2, or your 3 seed, but not falling anywhere below that. And I see the Cincinnati Bengals being your 1, 2, or 3 seed and not falling anywhere below that. And the only team that could fall outside, again, and let me reiterate this, the only team that could fall outside of this first 3 seeding area is the Denver Broncos by virtue of losing the division. If they don't win the division, they swap places with the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Broncos go down to the 5th seed, and the Kansas City Chiefs would assume one of these top 3 seeds up here, depending on how the records shake out. So it's going to be a very, very interesting stretch as these teams try to jockey for position. And you know what? It's a great problem to have if you're one of these, 5 teams up here, because 1 through 5 is locked in terms of whether you're in the postseason or not. These 5 teams, Denver, New England, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Kansas City, are all going to make it to the postseason. You can be assured of that. Even though they haven't all clinched, they've all clinched, essentially. So these 5 teams are going to get a ticket to the dance. It's this 6th seed that really has to work to try to make sure that they make it in. And nothing is guaranteed to the 6th seed right now. And so the 6th seed would love to have the problems of the Denver Broncos, New England Patriots, Cincinnati Bengals, where you're jockeying essentially for positioning inside of the playoffs. The Ravens down here are just fighting for their lives, and we'll get to them in a second. But we go on to the 4 seed. And of all of the teams in the postseason right now, this is the only seed that is locked in. The Indianapolis Colts aren't going anywhere. They're going to be your 4 seed, most likely in the AFC playoffs, because, and here's why. I've already talked about them being the only team right now in this conference that has clinched their division. That's why you see the green star there. But at 8-5 and 6-3 in the conference, you look at their 8-5 overall record, and they just lost to Cincinnati last week in Cincinnati. So Cincinnati holds the tiebreaker over them. Plus, Cincinnati has a 1-game advantage in the standings. Cincinnati being 9-4 overall, Indianapolis being at 8-5. So you're talking about essentially a 2-game cushion, a 2-game spread with 3 to go. Highly unlikely that they'll be able to leapfrog Cincinnati for that 3 spot. They're not going to be able to catch New England or Denver, because neither one of those teams are going to finish the season at 11-5, which is the best case scenario for Indianapolis. So Denver is going to win at least one of their 2 remaining games. So is New England. They're going to win at least one of their 3 remaining games. And so they can't catch either one of these 2 teams. Cincinnati owns a 2-game lead with 3 to go. I don't see them catching them either. So essentially, Indianapolis, being that they're a divisional winner, can't fall any lower than number 4. Once you win your division, you are guaranteed one of the first 4 seeds in that conference. And they've already won their division, so they are guaranteed to be no lower than the 4th seed. And I don't see them going any higher than 4. So essentially what I'm saying to you is the Indianapolis Colts are locked in at the number 4 seed. And so that's the worst seed that you could be in the AFC playoffs, if you ask me, because you're guaranteed to either have to play the Kansas City Chiefs or the Denver Broncos in the first round. And those are teams that you don't want any part of if you are the Indianapolis Colts. Now, if you're the Colts, you're saying to yourself, hey, I already beat Denver. I'm not afraid of those guys. And Kansas City doesn't scare me either. They don't score a lot of points. But neither do you. Since Reggie Wayne has gotten injured, you don't score a lot of points. In the Denver Broncos, you beat them, and it took every weapon in your arsenal to help you get that done. You don't have Reggie Wayne anymore. You're not the same team that you were when you beat the Denver Broncos some month and a half, 2 months ago. So you're a different ball club now. And you don't want any part of Kansas City. You don't want any part of Denver, but you don't have any choice because of what your record indicates and reflects. You're going to be the number 4 seed, and you're probably going to be ousted from the playoffs in wild card weekend. I know you don't want to hear that, so I'll stop talking about it, but just know that's the impending doom that you're facing going into the postseason. You look at the 5th seed, Kansas City. The Chiefs at 10-3 overall, 6-3 within the conference. This is a good football team that still has an outside shot at beating the Denver Broncos out for the AFC West crown. So you can't lock them in as the number 5 seed. Heck, just a week ago, I thought that this division had been signed, sealed, and delivered. But with that San Diego Chargers victory on Thursday Night Football in Denver, everything has changed, and that division is still wide open. Kansas City can get to 11-3 with a win this weekend, and if they're able to do so in Oakland, that'll set the stage for a very, very, very nasty AFC West race down the stretch. So I really want to see how that is going to unfold. The Chiefs right now could leapfrog all of these teams and get to number 1 or number 2, depending on what the records are at the end of the season. Or they could stay pat right where they are. The Chiefs are locked in as either the number 5 seed or the number 1 or 2 seed. I don't see Kansas City getting from 5 and going to number 3. I don't see that happening. I think they're going to be your 5 seed, or they're going to be your 1 seed, or they're going to be your 2 seed. But right now, I think all arrows point to the Chiefs staying exactly where they are at the 5 seed. I still don't think they're going to win this division because the Broncos own the tiebreaker. I think that worst case scenario, Denver wins their last 2 games. What that loss to San Diego did essentially to Denver is it made that Week 17 matchup versus the Oakland Raiders that much more important now. At first, you could look at that matchup potentially if the Patriots lose and Kansas City drops a game. That game might not have meant much to them in Week 17. Now, all of a sudden, they have to have that game. They don't have any margin for error anymore. They allowed that to be squandered with that loss at home to San Diego. So Chiefs are sitting in a really good spot right now because even if you don't win the division and you stay at 5, I like your chances against Indianapolis on the road in Wild Card Weekend. I feel like you're in a great spot if you are the Kansas City Chiefs. If you stay right where you are, you get a first-round matchup against the Colts. In Indy, you got to feel like that's a winnable football game. If you decide to win the division, you get a first-round bye, and somebody's going to have to come to Arrowhead, one of the toughest places to play in the National Football League, and get a win. So I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs are in a great spot right now in the AFC playoff picture. Now, let's get to the all-important wild card race in the AFC. This second wild card berth is on the line. This 6th seed right here, currently held by the Baltimore Ravens, the defending Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens, coming into Week 15 with a mark of 7-6 overall. They're 6-4 in the conference, so they're playing some solid football within the AFC. That's what's keeping them afloat right now. They struggled against teams in the NFC this season, however, but this is a team that all they have to do is win. If they want to get in, just win. And I've already said this, and I'll continue to say this. I think that 9-7 will be your 6th seed in the AFC conference. So if the Ravens can find a way to win 2 out of their 3 remaining games, they'll get into the postseason. I think that'll do enough to get them in at 9-7, because I think the Chargers, if they win the rest of their games, which is possible now that they beat Denver, they can get to 9-7. But even if they finish 9-7 and Baltimore finishes 9-7, Baltimore will still get in over San Diego because of this conference mark. This second number that you see back here, this second record is 6-4 for Baltimore right now, and it's 4-6 for San Diego. So San Diego has a lot of work to do, and they need a lot of help to get in. But, you know, if Baltimore can get to 9-7, I think they'll get into the postseason because of the work that they did earlier in this year. And that's why it's so important to do your work early to set the foundation for you to have a shot to get into the postseason later on down the line. And the Ravens have done that by winning games within this conference, by beating teams like the Miami Dolphins, who are right behind them on their heels trying to get in. Both of these teams come into the weekend at 7-6. Miami is currently the 7th seed in the AFC playoff picture. Just on the outside looking in, they're in the hunt. They're 7-6 as well, coming off of a win in week number 14 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, a huge win that really eliminated the Pittsburgh Steelers essentially from playoff contention. They're 7-6. They're 6-3 overall in the conference, so they're right there with the Ravens. If they can get to if they can get to 9-7 as well, their shot to get in will be just as great as the Ravens. Now, like I've said this before, let me break this down for you. If the Ravens get to 9-7, and I think that's the number that these teams should be shooting for. Again, all of these teams right now are shooting for 10-6 because that's the most, wins that they can grab on the season. That's the best possible record that they can get if they win the rest of their games. So all of these teams, Dolphins and Ravens, are both shooting for 10-6. The best the Chargers can do at this point with 7 losses is 9-7. So everybody's trying to maximize their record, but I just don't see. And Baltimore, to me, has a murderer's row schedule. Of all these playoff contending teams, all of these teams looking to get in on the outside, trying to get in on the inside already, jockeying for position. The Ravens have the toughest schedule remaining. I mean, it's brutal. And if they're able to get into the postseason, and I think Mike Mayock said it on Thursday Night Football, and I think he was right. He was spot on. If the Ravens get in, if they get to 9-7, they earned their way in. They won their way in like a champion should. And so the Ravens, they've got Detroit on the road, they've got New England at home, and they're at Cincinnati to finish up. I think they said it was 26-13, a combined record of those 3 teams. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. That is a tough stretch of football to finish up this season. So Ravens got a lot of work to do to try to get in, but that bodes well for a team like Miami, who is 7-6, 6-3 in the conference. And the Dolphins, I feel like they've got an easier slate, to finish up this season. They got a home game versus the Patriots. That's going to be huge within that division, as that will give the Dolphins a chance to really, separate themselves from a lot of these teams trying to get in. They can win that game. They got the Jets and the Bills to finish up the season. They could win the rest of those games and easily get to 10-6 if they win against New England in week number 15. So that's a huge matchup. But if they lose that game to New England, they still can get to 9-7 by beating the Jets, by beating the Buffalo Bills to finish out the season. And so that's a huge matchup for them. If Baltimore finishes up at 9-7 and so do the Dolphins, Baltimore gets in by virtue of a head-to-head win versus the Miami Dolphins earlier in the season in Miami. So again, Baltimore doing work early on in the season that's going to reap them benefits if they're able to take advantage of their schedule down the stretch. So we'll see how that unfolds, because if you're the Dolphins, you just got to win. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're tied with the Ravens at the end of the season. They already beat you. They own the tiebreaker. You wouldn't be able to get in over them. So you got to just win football games if you are the Dolphins. If you're the San Diego Chargers, all you can do is win and pray for help, because This number back here is what's probably going to cost this San Diego Chargers team from getting into the postseason. Right here. This conference record at 4-6, you got to do work within the conference. You got to beat other teams in your conference. What this 4-6 mark says to me is that you've lost to a lot of teams in the AFC, and more importantly, you've lost to some teams in front of you trying to get into the postseason. And one team in particular that these Chargers have lost to is that Miami Dolphins team right above them in the standings. Even if the Dolphins drop that game in Week 15 to the New England Patriots on Sunday, they'll still be ahead of the San Diego Chargers in the standings, even though both teams will be 7-7 on the season, because the Miami Dolphins beat the San Diego Chargers about 3 weeks ago in Miami. And so that's a huge game right now. And so if you're the Chargers, you got to beat teams within your conference. They haven't done so this season enough. And so right now they're at a disadvantage, but all they can do is win. All you can do at this juncture of the season is win, let the chips fall where they may, and see what happens when it's all said and done. And so if you're San Diego, maximize your record. You're at 7-7 now. The best you can finish is 9-7. Do it. Do it and see what that gets you. That's all you can do. Because I said 9-7 is going to be your 6th seed. Somebody in these 3 last teams trying to get in, Baltimore, Miami, San Diego, one of these 3 teams is going to finish the season at 9-7, and they're going to get in, and they're going to be a scary team. To me, the best team out of these 3 is the San Diego Chargers. I feel like the Chargers right now are playing the best football. You don't know what team is going to show up, but you do know that Phillip Rivers is going to play at an extremely high level. He's got targets. They're a dangerous football team. If the defense shows up, you could be in for a long day. And I think the San Diego Chargers, to me, are the most well-rounded team of these 3 teams trying to get in. The Dolphins, you don't know what you're getting from Tannehill from week to week. You know, he stares down receivers. He's a really young, up-and-coming quarterback. But he's still got some things, some hitches and some glitches in his game that can be taken advantage of by some good defenses. And Lamar Miller, 1 week he's rushing for 100 yards. The next week he's non-existent. He's invisible. The next week he's rushing for 5 carries for 1 yard. And so you don't know what you're getting out of their running game. Daniel Thomas had a huge game against Pittsburgh, but again, you don't know if you can rely on him from week to week either. This Dolphins defense is opportunistic. They force turnovers. Brent Grimes has been an animal, and Cameron Wake has been getting after the quarterback, Olivier Martin, Vernon, all those guys have been playing good football. The Dolphins are a scary team, but I just think San Diego is more well-rounded if they could get in. Baltimore, their offense is anemic. That's their problem, is that, hey, defensively, they're one of the better teams in the league. They're a top 10 defense. They're rated 9th right now. They can do some things defensively. Offensively is where they struggle. They can't run the football. Joe Flacco is inconsistent unless it's under 2 minutes. This is a team that struggles to put up points. And I just don't know if they have enough this year to do any damage in the AFC playoffs. But I think the Chargers do. But again, it doesn't matter who's playing the best football. All that matters is who finishes with a good enough mark to get in. And even though the Chargers could be playing the best football of all these teams when it's all said and done, they struggled early on in the season with consistency, and that might come back to haunt them because of this 4-6 record in the conference. That might be the thing that stops them from getting into the postseason. So that's essentially the AFC conference in a nutshell. The Denver Broncos are still number 1 right now, but it could all change. This whole situation is fluid. With the exception of the Indianapolis Colts, this whole playoff picture in the AFC is fluid, and it's a situation that can change at any second, at a moment's notice. If New England wins, they go to number 1. Denver drops down to number 2. If Kansas City wins, they're now tied with Denver in the AFC West, and they could potentially win that division and swap places with Denver wherever they are. And so it's a big ball of confusion right now in the AFC. Cincinnati, with the win and a New England Patriot loss, would switch places with them. They could go to the 2 seed. Patriots would drop down to the 3 seed. So, I mean, there's so many different scenarios and ways this could play out. But again, 1 through 5 is locked in terms of teams getting in. Even though all of those teams have not clinched a playoff berth yet, all of these teams from 1 through 5 are going to be in the postseason. The only spot that's in question is 6, and that's between 3 teams in my estimation. Again, the Jets are at 6-7. They're only a game out but the Jets aren't a good enough team. They won't win enough games down the stretch. They've been inconsistent all year. What can the Jets do to make me think, to make you think, to make anybody think that they're playoff worthy? I can't see the Jets winning, 2 out of their next 3 out of their next 4 to get to a 9-7 mark. They would have to win all 3 of their last games, all 3 of them, just to get to 9-7, which is what I think is going to be mandatory of whoever is in that 6th seed. So that's the AFC playoff picture in a nutshell. I mean, it's confusing, but it's really simple when you look at it. I honestly think this board is going to stay exactly like it is. But if you want my honest assessment, I think that the 6th seed is going to end up being the Miami Dolphins. That's what I honestly think. I think the Dolphins are going to get in because their schedule is soft down the stretch. And even if they don't beat New England, and I think they're going to beat New England in Week 15, but even if they don't, they still got the Jets and they got the Bills, 2 winnable games. They've already went to New York and ousted the Jets. They lost to the Bills in Miami, so that's going to be a tough one to get. And like I said earlier in the season, I'd hate to be a team down the stretch that has to go to Buffalo to get a win. And that's what Miami will have to do. But if you want to get into the postseason, this isn't the time to be having problems within the family. You got family business. This is the time that you need to take care of it if you want to go to the show and get a ticket to the dance. And so I think the Dolphins have the most realistic shot of getting that 6th and final playoff berth in the AFC. That's going to do it for the AFC playoff picture. I thank you for joining me here on this program. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the Lab Room. Thank you for joining me on this In the Lab Room exclusive. That's the AFC playoff picture. I'll be back very shortly with the NFC playoff race as well. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.
In the lab